That she confirmed, Chair.
Okay, Gora Mayagat, thank you, and Tafalcha Rove Elig, Tasha Valig Falcha, and Shaw Guji Ardwaha, or Majin Shaw. You're all very welcome here to Lowerland Cardinal Tomás O'Fea this morning for our meeting of the Committee for Communities. This is the 87th meeting of the Committee for Communities. Can I remind anyone in the public gallery that mobile phones must be turned off. Mobile tablet devices can, however, be used through a Wi-Fi connection, and all devices should be muted. No recordings or photographs are to be taken. Can I also remind members about the protocols regarding the use of electronic devices? Please switch all mobile devices to airplane mode and activate Wi-Fi connection. Please also use tablets discreetly in a way which does not interfere with the proceedings, and I would remind everyone about the sensitivity of microphones. Members, just to make you aware, Broadcasting has advised that the powered speakers being used to facilitate today's meeting may be prone to interference from mobile phones. If I could ask you to move your mobiles away from the mics, make sure they're on airplane mode, and we can then move on to our agenda. So thank you for that. So agenda item 1, members, declaration of interest. Do members of any interest wish to declare a particular interest in today? Shan?
Just under the university, the third age, I have close family members who are involved in U3A in Ballycastle.
Thank you, Shan. Anything else, members? Otherwise, content?
Harry Gregg Foundation Charity.
Yeah.
And all the other stuff.
Yep, thank you, Morris. Thank you. Okay, thank you, members. I'm moving on then to apologies. Clerk, do we have any apologies today?
I have Andy Allen, Kelly Armstrong, Mark Durkin, and Kathy Mason.
Okay, thank you, Clerk. Yeah, and the rest of us are here. So, moving on then to Chair's business then, agenda item 3, members. Firstly, I'd like to thank you, members, for making the journey here today. I'm delighted to have our 87th meeting of the Committee for Communities here in the Cardinal Tomás O'Fea Library and Archive. The work they do here is really fascinating, and I am particularly looking forward to hearing the presentation today in the upcoming or forthcoming sessions. Just to say as well, this is my old alma mater right behind us here, St Patrick's College was my school, so I'm quite familiar with the location. But also to say that I have very, very fond personal memories of Cardinal Tomás O'Fea. He was chaplain in the jails around the very difficult times, the blanket protest and the hunger strikes, and around that period of time. Cardinal O'Fea would have struck up a very great friendship with an uncle of mine, Francis, who was a blanket man, and as a result would have been in our house quite frequently. And I have, as a young child, I have very strong memories of his humour, his charisma, but also his huge modesty and his huge ability to engage people right at every level. He also confirmed me as well in Auchnacloy, so I have many strong memories of him, and he was a wonderful and a very significant figure in Irish history, I think. So it's also very relevant in terms of our work as a Committee for Communities here, that this library is very much a part of that fabric of archives, repositories of history, and doing very important work. So I'm delighted that our committee has made this trip today to what is, as well as that, the ecclesiastical capital of Ireland, a very historic city and a very significant site here right across the city in terms of all of the churches here on the island. So thank you for that, members. I'd also like to remind you, members, that around this time last year we took the committee meeting to both Proney and the Ulster Folk Museum at Clontarf, so it's great to be here to see an archive on a different scale, although I learned today, and I wasn't aware of that this may be the second largest archive after Proney, which is very significant, I think, in itself. Also to remind you, members, that the CAMS office held a sign language drop-in event on Tuesday this week to mark the passage of the Sign Language Bill through the Assembly, with members of the deaf community in attendance, talking about deaf culture and working with interpreters. I wasn't able to get that. I was very annoyed, actually. I would have liked to get, but I wasn't able, but I believe it was a very successful event. Finally, members, then, for information, we have an amendment to our agenda today. We are originally due to hear from the West Ender Committee at agenda item 9. However, due to a bereavement, they are unfortunately unable to attend today. We do, however, have Dr. Campbell from the Mellon Centre for Migration Studies stepping in, so I'm sure that will also be a very informative briefing. Can I propose, members, that we write to the West Enders Committee to thank them for their cooperation and interest in the committee and in the run-up to this, and send condolences on behalf of our members to that organisation? Thank you, members. Okay, members, so we're going to move on then to our briefing, first briefing today, which is what agenda item, Clerk?
It is agenda item, pardon me, 9.
Agenda item 9.
No, tell a lie, it's agenda item 10.
10. So we're just juggling things around a little bit, members, in terms of the running order, given the way the morning has worked out and who we have here at present. And I'll just, before I start, I'll double check that I have all the names for agenda item 10 correct. Yep. So agenda item 10 is the Cardinal, Tomás Library and Archive and oral briefing. The briefing paper for the agenda item can be found starting at page 24 of your table of papers. And I'd now like to welcome the following officials to the meeting. So we're joined by Roddy Haggerty. Roddy, come ahead, please. Roddy's Director of the Cardinal, Tomás Library and Archive, and Colm Shannon. And Colm is a trustee with the Library and Archive. Do we have Michael McKeown? Can I just check? No. Okay. Okay, thank you. So, members, we'll go to Roddy first to make an opening statement, and then we'll come to questions from members. Members are content with that. So, Roddy, ta fáilte romh, agus gorma agus lán ar éile dul. You're very welcome, and please go ahead with your briefing.
Gorma agus, ta fáilte road. The members should already have in their possession the report that was provided before the meeting. So I don't want to focus too much on that, other than to really echo again the sort of type of work that we do. We're sitting in a room today that contains the banner for the current USA 250 commemorations. And that is something which we have played a key role in, along with our colleagues here in other institutions in Armagh. And it has been, to date, a resounding success. So I would just like to thank the department for the funding that was supplied to enable us to carry that forward. It has been very, very welcome. The focus of the report that was provided really looked at the last sort of year and a half to give people a flavour of the type of work that the Cardinal O'Fee Library and Archive do. We opened here in May of 1999. The library itself is a self-governing trust. It's a charity. And often, because of its title and because of its location, people fall into two categories. One, they think we're part of the library service. We're not. We're actually an independent library, a little like the Armagh Robinson Library or the Linen Hall Library, for instance. But neither are we part of the church. We are a self-governing entity. And that is something which we would really like to emphasise, that we, as they say in my part of the world, we wash our own face when it comes to funding. From this, I think it's important that we also remind the members that we have demonstrated over the course of the last quarter of a century since we were established a solid track record in innovation and ambition, and that has been very much in our approach to engagement. I arrived here in 2006 to do a 3-year outreach project in education and interpretation, and I'm now in my 20th year here. So that's, like, I wouldn't have made that personal investment if I didn't think that this institution was worthwhile. And in that time, I have to say that it has grown into a real sort of social hub in this part of Armagh. And Armagh and its environs, of course, is very well provided for in terms of heritage and heritage organisations, but it is one of those areas which really struggles economically and has great sort of social challenges. So it's important that we have institutions such as the Cardinal O'Fee Library and Archive that we can open up to the public. I would have to say that none of that would have been possible over the course of the last 25 years had it not been for a modest amount of government funding. Initially, we received support through a secondment for a librarian here, but really for the past 12 or 15 years, we have applied for and received a small annual grant from latterly the Department for Culture, Arts and Leisure, but in the last iteration from the Department for Communities. Without that, we simply wouldn't be sustainable. We wouldn't be able to leverage grant aid from other organisations. It gives us a sense of permanency, which other funders like. They don't want us having that doubt that we won't be here this time in 6 months, 12 months or 24 months. So I want to personally and collectively on behalf of the Library and Archive to thank the department and the executive in general for that support. The grant aid is small and it has diminished, I suppose, in real terms over that period of time, but it is nevertheless good value for money. Like, for every pound that we get, we can harness perhaps another 2 or 3 or sometimes £4 annually on that basis, because we are able then to go and say to other funders that we are actually doing project work. We're not just simply here to open the doors, turn the lights on and invite people in. We actually do significant work. And in relation to that, I would draw attention to a number of initiatives that we have carried out over the last year. And I know this was mentioned, that some of this is provided for in the pre-meeting briefing. But one real solid initiative that we were involved in fact we designed and delivered it ourselves, was the Common Threads project, which engaged both the Dan Winters Cottage in Loughgall with the West Enders group, who were supposed to be here today, and also the University of the Third Age. And that was an initiative really to take something as basic as textiles and the history of textiles, but to look at it over a period of time, collectively engage people in field trips where they could meet and share their own experiences and ideas, but also collectively to learn about our common history. And not just about the history of the textile industry, but the way in which that cross-cuts with all sorts of other events that have occurred here over not just the last 100 years or 200 years, but perhaps over the last 400 or 1,000 years. And I'm not being in any way blowing our own trumpet here, but it was a resounding success, and the post-project feedback was so good that we've decided to try to do a follow-on initiative over the course of the next 12 months. As I say, without the basic funding that we get from the department, none of that work would be achievable, because that particular initiative is funded by another funder. So really what I'm here to do is to demonstrate the good economic sense of funding a venture like this. We do not fall within the statutory remit of the department. We are very much aware of that. But what we do is that we assist with our colleagues in the other institutions in Armagh in delivering important facets of the programme for government and addressing issues which are keenly felt, especially in this area. This brings me to the current museums consultation, which is part of the Heritage Programme. I would say that in reading the original Heritage Programme document, there are 4 aspects to this, only one of which is currently being consulted on. There was an ambition that all 4 aspects of that would be consulted on in 2025. And it now seems that the museums policy will form the basis for funding, including for institutions like this going forward. That strongly suggests that we would have to be a museum accredited by the Northern Ireland Museums Council in order to apply for the type of funding that we have received in recent years. I would strongly say that we are not a museum. We have no pretensions to be a museum. We are a library and archive, and libraries and archives are 2 of the other legs of that particular programme. So it's important, I think, that that distinction is made, and it would also be important going forward that institutions like this are not materially disadvantaged by the fact that that is the sole method of applying for funding from the 1st of April of next year. And I would ask members to recognise that and please convey that to the department in general. From that, really, I would really just once again like to thank the committee for choosing to come and visit us here today. I think it's important that we move out of what can often be seen in the western half of the north, that Belfast tends to dominate the conversation, and that sometimes places like Armagh can perhaps seem a little invisible when decisions are being made. Armagh has a rich cultural heritage. It has a vibrant community. It does have its economic and social issues, as other places do have, but it is a real national treasure. And this particular institution within that is a real local, national, and I would argue international treasure in terms of what we house and how we use it for engagement with not only the local community, but with tourists and other visitors at large. So thank you very much for listening to us this morning, and I'm happy to take any follow-up questions.
Thank you, Roddy. That's very interesting and very welcome, and thank you for your written briefing as well. And we will come to follow-up actions actually in relation to some of the items that you have maybe touched upon there. In terms of the visitors, and it's quite impressive. Like 100, I'm suspecting it's well over 100 people a week coming here. If you take an average, and 3,400, so it's 5,000 a year visitors, 3,400 off-site. What kinds of audience are you reaching? Are there groups that you'd like to engage with more effectively? Are there groups who maybe don't know that you have something here that would be of interest to them?
There always are. Thank you very much. I would have to say that our visitor numbers, like a lot of institutions, suffered quite badly over the period of COVID. There was at one stage before COVID where we would have had perhaps 11 or 12,000 users per annum. That obviously has taken a major dip, or did at least over that period. So we are still in that slow climb out of that, but I think we have performed quite well. And we've done that by engaging directly with some of the user groups. So by providing things like a community art class here, we with the U3A, having even French classes or book clubs and so on, this really addresses a social need. It's a need not just for engagement, but for counteracting a sense of social isolation that a lot of these organisations and individuals suffer from. As I say, we're a hub, and sometimes those monthly or weekly visits to a place like this might be the only social engagement that a lot of those people have. I used to work for the Federation for Ulster Local Studies, and I remember a conversation with the then Minister for Culture, Arts and Leisure, and emphasising the importance of local studies to him, because, as I said, the visit to the local studies group or getting out to the local library might be the only time that a person who lives on their own has an opportunity for social interaction, perhaps outside of going to church on a Sunday. And it's a very, very important aspect of our work. In terms of where the people come from that use it, I would say 70 to 75% of our user group come within a 5 to 10 mile radius of Armagh. However, we are also very conscious that we are now drawing users both on site and online from much, much further away from that. And thankfully, we have seen an uptake on people coming even from Belfast to Armagh to investigate the collections that we have here. We would be used by a mixture of community, individuals searching sometimes for family history, sometimes for local history, but also professional organisations, solicitors, firms, even other legal entities. The coroner's office, for instance, would occasionally come here to make use of some of our collections. So it's a very broad range. And not only that, I would emphasise again that it's a very broad cross-section of our society. So we are welcoming to anyone, irrespective of their background.
Okay, thank you. And that's very interesting and I think very promising in the sense of future potential. So thank you for that. In terms of the US 250, and I know you're playing a particular role in that, I have to say I have a kind of an abiding interest in this myself because as a Republican, I've been very acutely aware of the flows of people back and forward between here and the US over many, many years. And certainly that history of what became known as the Tree of Liberty, which was said to have been planted in the US, took root in France and flowered in Ireland at the 1916 rebellion. But also not only that history, but even that people in my own family and community have travelled back and forward to the USA, often for the same reasons in current times, sometimes fleeing oppression, sometimes to build what they see as a better life. So I think there's real genuine deep links between here and the US. Actually, when Joe Biden visited, I was in the Dáil, and the speaker, Sean O'Farrell, on that day pointed out that at that point in time when Joe Biden was here, we all know the story of American investment into Ireland, and it's very welcome, and it's a huge part of our story. But at that time, Ireland was the 9th largest investor into the US. That actually climbed to the 5th largest in the intervening years. I'm not sure where it sits currently, but that is a very untold part of the story, but it demonstrates those links. So how can the US 250 work help strengthen links between the North here and the Irish and Ulster diaspora in the United States, not only culturally, but also through education, tourism and community partnerships?
Well, the first thing I would say is thank you again to the Department for funding the initiative that we are engaged in here in Armagh. We have been pleasantly surprised. I don't think it's any secret, know that the USA and current politics can be a polarising subject in the current era. But what we have deliberately tried to do is to look at the history, look at the themes which gave rise to the American Declaration of Independence in the first place. So our idea in all of this has always to look at stories, to look at those connections, to eke out the personalities, the people from this part of the world who often played a role that is unsung. I think if we roll back to 1976, when we marked the 200th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, there was probably a little bit of a sycophantic approach to trying to discover the roots of presidents and generals and so on. This time around, I think what we have tried to do is to look at ordinary people. And I think that chimes well with a broader audience, because no, not everyone has a president in their family. And indeed, even some of those claims in retrospect have kind of proven to be tenuous, whereas what we have done is to look at the real stories of ordinary people's lives and the way in which the outworkings of the American Revolution impacted on society, not just here, but there as well. We're at pains also to, if you had had the pleasure, for instance, of last night's presentation, which was given by myself, we sometimes think of the American state as being born ready to know in a mature fashion, whereas we don't really see it as a new state being born and having to grow through infancy and reach maturity over a certain period of time. And that has got to do largely with the way in which colonisation took place in North America. The people spoke the same language as they spoke this side of the Atlantic. They almost were having a revolution in a European context, albeit separated by a vast area of ocean. But those connections are still there. I think people are keenly aware in the United States of the family connections that they have in this part of the world. And we, as part of our work here, carry out a considerable amount of genealogical research for people. And again, it's one of these assets that we provide for visitors. And I would say that I would hope will be not a novel idea of engaging people from the United States, but a continuation of work and a building on work that has been going on now for generations. But I do think that there is an opportunity that anything that we do that highlights the opportunity for inward investment, including especially places like Armagh, would be very positive.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead to members then. I have Sian and Melissa at this point. So Sian, Blanna, right?
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to something you had talked about there around the museums consultations are at the moment. We're actually I know myself, I'm working on a response to it. Do you believe then that it's the intent that you would not be eligible for that future funding if you did not become an accredited museum?
Certainly, reading strongly between the lines, that seems to be implied that in the way in which funding, and if my colleague Colm here might want to chip in on part of this as well, it seems that there is an obvious need for regularisation. There are a few anomalies of organisations currently who are funded without the statutory obligations of the department, and we would be one of those, and we're very grateful for it. However, it does seem to imply, in the absence of a libraries policy, an archives policy, and one which deals with environmental heritage sitting alongside museums, that museums they're very important, but in terms of our context, it's a very narrow definition of what makes a contribution to culture and heritage. We are not a museum. We do have a very modest collection of artefacts, but our day and daily work deals with paper. It deals with archives. It deals with inquiries in a literary fashion, rather than the type of work that you would normally encounter in a museum. That's not to say that there isn't crossover, but if it became an absolute obligation for us to become, let's say, a museum, and then to seek museum accreditation without any guarantee of funding going forward, because then obviously you would be in a pool competing with a vast array of other bodies, some of whom I'm not saying that they don't merit funding, because they very evidently do, but I think that it would be such a seismic change in terms of how we would have approached our application and indeed the type of work that we do, because we are very much about engaging people through the archival end of our work, and also through the publications, the important publications that we hold here. So yes, I would be somewhat concerned, let's say, if it was very narrow.
Chair, if maybe I could add to that, it was firstly, can I, on behalf of the trustees, thank you for coming down here today. It's very much appreciated, and devolution is about local, and this is a real example of it, so thank you very much for doing that. At our last meeting a couple of weeks ago, the museums policy was subject to discussion, and we will be formally writing in response. But as Roddy has touched upon, we feel the funding is being shoehorned into this policy, and last year this report talked about an archive policy as well, and it seems to be silent on that. And we, as part of our response to the community, Department of Communities, we would be asking about that, because we're not a museum. We have some nice things out there, and Roddy did a fantastic presentation of that this morning, but we're a library and an archive, and we're about telling the story of the history of this country and beyond. And the Dan Winter project is an absolutely fabulous example of how we have used the archive and our history to bring two communities together that would never have met each other. And it's unfortunate the West Enders aren't going to be here today, but it is an example of the small things that we do. We would just be worried that this would then become, the Bible in terms of how funding happens, and that we would lose out. We get I don't know what you say, we get 30,000 from the Department of Communities. Our total expenditure last year was just under 113,000. So we have a cocktail of funding that the 30,000 allows us to get. And one of the other issues, we have a really good working relationship with the department, and as a former civil servant, I know how difficult funding is. So, we could begin the year, we put our bid in, but I've been here, 5 years now, and I think only 1 year did we get the funding in the first couple of months, and 1 year I think it was in the final quarter. It's very, very difficult to plan on that basis. So we know the importance of getting sort of a clearer policy around funding, and hopefully that would help us as well. But we would like to see something about libraries and archives as well as museums, so that we know where we fit, because I think we have an important role to play in the heritage and the history of our society.
Great. Can I then also ask, I suppose it's that long-term future goals, in terms of the space and the asset that you have here, and you'd mentioned having over 1 million articles in your archive. Where is the plan there? Is there, I suppose, a long-term sustainable future for the library here at this site?
At this site, absolutely. We own the building. We own the ground in which the building sits. So everything within the railings outside this building belongs to the Cardinal O'Fee Library and Archive Trust. So we are, as I say, a standalone. So there's no issue of us being evicted, for instance, if funding becomes an issue. The one thing that I would, and I often say this to people, is that we are a real sort of local and national treasure in terms of what we hold. And there is even though that we understand that we fall out with the statutory obligation, because of the importance of the material held in here, we often have said in our applications that if we don't look after this material, someone else will. And in fact, it's of such importance that the state would obviously have to step in and do that. What we do at the minute for a very modest contribution each year is to secure this for the state, to secure it for the community that it serves. So yes, and there is always that niggle of doubt going forward. Will we be here in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years' time? I would argue, well, people asked us the same question in 1999 or 1998 before this building was opened. And more than a quarter of a century on, we have demonstrated our ability to be sustainable and to move forward in an innovative and creative way in order to maintain that. Yes, there is that uncertainty, and it's partly driven by the uncertainty that here we are now at the end of the first week of June, and I have yet to even hear a response to the business case that I submitted for this financial year. So, no, that doesn't help, and it certainly doesn't help that we have to apply and reapply on an annual basis. It would be much, much more reliable if there was I don't know, this cuts across the board. I'm sure people in the Department of Education or the Health Department and every other department will say the same. The lack of a vision for 2, 3, 4 years down the line hinders any sense of real planning that we have. But importantly, and I'll come back to this, the money which is invested by the department into this institution provides excellent value for money. It provides a return because we can use it to leverage other funding from other sources. And that's where the sustainability is built, because we recognise that it requires that cocktail of funding. But no, it's like, remember that game of Kerplunk where you pull the sticks out? If we remove one element of funding, there's always the danger that something will fall.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of the future strategy, it's about innovation. Roddy could very easily just sit here and put the books in boxes and forget about it and deal with the odd person that might come in. He actively goes out and promotes, develops projects which also help us secure funding. So, you know, that, as he said, that 30,000 gives us the base to go out and explore other funding opportunities and allow us the opportunity to then sell the documents and use the documents for the benefit of communities and academics and others that have an interest in those documents.
Thanks so much.
Enough in that some of those people are travelling to come here, they're going to stay overnight, they're going to be, you know, so there's a potential there as well. Okay, just when you mentioned the Dan Winters thing, I have to say, and we probably have crossed paths at a distance on this one, but in the Brantry, in our own community centre, we would have been part of programmes that were hosting communities from both sides of interface in Belfast. They would have come to Dan Winters Cottage first, and then they came over to the Brantry, where we'd have discussed the Caledon eviction and that civil rights period. So really fascinating to see the common threads of people coming together from both sides discussing both of those issues. So just to acknowledge that.
Could I say something about our follow-on project that we plan for next year if we get our funding secured?
Yeah.
And it's called the ULTACT project, because immediately after the Battle of the Diamond there was a serious and sustained outward migration from North Armagh and parts of East Tyrone and even parts of West County Down. And that followed two distinct patterns. One, there was a significant migration of the Catholic community from that area who ended up in Connacht. They were known in Connacht as the Ulstermen or the Ultac, but there was also a sustained migration of the Protestant community out of that area, driven by the decline of the domestic linen industry. So many of them were driven off their small holdings and had to go to places like Belfast and so on to find a future. And our project next year is to really try to relocate those connections with people and to see the impact that that period of history had, and to, once again to do that in a cross-community fashion so that we learn from each other's histories. And as I say, those sort of projects are only capable of being delivered once we have an element of core security.
Thank you, Roddy. Manisha, Lanarail the cash 10. Go ahead.
Fáilte roh le agus is Jasper láta a risa radi a spada lán ar bhíte tastal a machar héan go dara. It's very nice meeting you again here today, and it's a long time since Roddy was actually travelling with me to Derry. At that time I used to give him a lift, he was telling me. And that I'm glad that you were successful in your studies and that in Derry, that for your playing a very significant and important role here today as well too, Roddy. So fair play to you. Just in relation to your presentation, and I could identify quite easily with what you talked about whenever you had said that you provide a service and that to the local community and so on, and whether it come along and they be using the premises and the likes of it for different reasons or whatever. But I keep thinking then too in terms of the materials and that you have, that it's such an important resource in every way. And to what extent is it that that message has got out there to the wider community, we'll say, other than just we'll say within Armagh itself, that there is a resource of this nature? And as I ask that question, who is it that's likely to use that resource? Is it academia or who?
I think that it's actually a broad cross-section of people who make use of our resource here. In terms of the reach and broadcasting what we have here, since its inception I have sat on the Prony User Forum. And Prony are very well aware of the work that we do here. We also work collectively with other institutions in this area, the Library Service and Armagh Robinson Library, through a thing called the City Chapter, right? And that promotes literacy, it promotes poetry and so on. And we organise and run events across the year. In terms of taking it beyond that, over the course, I would say, of the last 10 years, I have worked with groups as far apart as West Tyrone, East Belfast, West Belfast. I've visited groups, I would say, in certainly in every county that has an interest in the type of material that we have here. It's part of the challenge, and going back to 2009, 2010, we recognised that, first of all, people have to make an effort to come to Armagh. The public transport service isn't brilliant, and I realised this myself on one occasion when my car broke down in Portadown on the way home, and I had to get a bus from Portadown to Belfast, which took 2 hours, 10 minutes. Now, that's not the average, but I travelled on the express bus, or a combination of the express bus and train, over the course of about 3 weeks, and it brought home to me how difficult it is for people travelling by public transport to make their way to Armagh in a timely fashion, or indeed to make their way home again. So we recognise the fact that to get to Armagh, you have to have some real, genuine reason to come here. And that's really what we've been trying to do. In fact, what I've been trying to do since I arrived here in 2006 is a combination of education, interpretation and outreach. And that outreach means that I will go and speak, let's say, to a local studies group in Draperstown or somewhere, and use the material that we have here, which is relevant to that area. And relevance has been my key word since the day I started here. It's to take the material in our collection which echoes their stories, that they can recognise as part of their story, and to use that as a means for them to come back and then further their own studies. In terms of the composition of the visitors, a lot of them are in that sort of local studies fraternity. A lot of people are retirees. A lot of people are academics who are undertaking original study using the resources that we have here. But yes, there are other organisations. As I mentioned earlier, solicitors' firms, even the legal offices, things like the coroner's office and so on, who would make use of the material that we have here simply because it can't be acquired elsewhere. So it is very much a broad mixture. Now, we can do with a staff of 1.5 what we can, and that is a major challenge. If we were If we were better staffed, better resourced, we could do a lot more, and we could certainly sell the material that we have here to a much broader audience. But crucially, I think our role is to demonstrate how relevant our materials are here to a broad community, and I think we've done that quite successfully and quite innovatively over the course of the last quarter of a century.
And just in terms of delivering that service, say to all of those other groups that would benefit from your services, do you charge for it?
On occasion we would, yes, but we are a free, independent library, so that we were constituted as anyone can come over the door and can get access to it. I would say that there is not a single library or archive anywhere in the world that is self-sufficient in terms of the financial end of things. Yes, we can charge modest fees, but no, charging modest fees is never, ever going to be the solution to the proper funding of a library and archive.
And just finally, in terms of projects and that's very interesting, that ULTA project, how do you or who decides what projects are going to be pursued?
That's my job, Willie. It's my job to be constantly thinking on my feet, thinking of innovative ideas. As I say, we have a very modest staff, and we have to basically do all of this in-house. From time to time, we have greatly benefited from the likes of the Heritage Lottery Fund, for instance, where we can draw down a grant perhaps for a project that runs more than 1 year. And in that particular instance, we might be able to employ a temporary member of staff to assist in that. But ultimately, the ideas for the outreach and engagement are driven by our collections. Because there's no sense in us doing outreach and engagement with collections that we don't have. So it's very much dictated by and reflective of the holdings in the library and archive. And I say it's about being innovative and creative when it comes to that. But it's all generated in-house.
Armagh, I wish you all the best too in the days ahead. You should have a task on hand in terms of funding in particular. I do think that.
Thank you, and just I suppose it's a good junction there, just to highlight the fact that we're the committee, and we scrutinise, but we also assist and advise the department. So certainly, I think we'll be able to pick up on some of those follow-up actions around that issue, which is coming across quite clearly. Maurice, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much for your presentation. Apologies, I missed the earlier part, but it's a fair wee distance time from Korea to here. I'd be interested to know how you intend to expand upon the 250th anniversary, and what the Irish and the Ulster Scots and the Ulster people, how they've contributed to the making of America as is today, although today's not a perfect example, but in the early years, the formation and the influence that we had from this small part of the world on what's now the most powerful nation in the world. So I'd be keen to hear how you intend to expand upon that there. I also picked up on the point where you're competing, in your opinion, and it's my opinion as well, because it affects my area, that you're competing with a large lobby for Belfast in most things. And it's something we all have to put up with. So I'd be keen to hear how that affects your work here, and also the archive part of your library. I have an archive going back to the early 1800s and the late 1800s. Not mine, I didn't take the photographs, it was mostly photographic. I've acquired it over the years. And then my own personal archive from 1972 to date, mostly sport. But I occasionally lend my images to the museum service in Coleraine. Unfortunately, Coleraine being the largest town within the Causeway Coast and Glens, we do not have a museum. We have one in Ballycastle, we have one in Ballymoney, we have the makings of one in Limavady. But trying to get politicians to see the value of an archive or the value of a museum, and having artefacts that are local, the history of what's local, on view for everyone to see, including visitors, is, in my opinion, sometimes a poor relation.
Yes, well, thank you very much for your question. If I can start off with the final point about museums and the value of them. I think that it's well proven that visits to museums are not just educative, but they're good for your general well-being. And I think actually if we go back to the document that we mentioned earlier on, this programme, No for Heritage and Culture, it's already noted in there the contribution that is made by museums to well-being within the community. I have to say that I started my career working with the Ulster Historical Foundation in Belfast, but I was very, very much driven towards a career in this field by time that I spent in the Ulster American Folk Park in the late 1980s as a student placement. I was a student at that time in Coleraine, and that whole experience of, and at the time I should say that history, when it was being taught in Coleraine in the 1980s, was very much about reflecting the story of the people around you. It was about learning and learning from the stories of that community, and I have tried to carry that with me really ever since. I have in the past, in previous roles, worked with the forerunner of Causeway Coast in Coleraine Council to do oral history projects and various other things, and the value that you get from that is immense, because not only does it feed into addressing that sense of social isolation that older people often feel with, but the stories that are collected are, they're invaluable, let's say, for an up-and-coming generation when those are then reflected back in through the education service. So I do think that there is huge merit in having local museums that reflect local stories. I fully understand that we have two parallel systems. I sat on the Northern Ireland Museums Council for about 7 years, and one of the biggest struggles, I think, in that whole time was to try and get some people behind the scenes to understand that, yes, we've got national museums, but we've also got the Museums Council that deal with independent museums. And it's important to see the distinction. It's important to distinguish between the particular roles that they have and the types of stories that they tell. So therefore, I would absolutely be a champion for telling the local story, and we do that in part here. But as I said at the outset, we're not a museum. We're a library and archive. We use different types of materials to do similar types of work. But the engagement that you get with people, I think, whether it's the artefacts that you might find in a museum, or indeed the paper that you might find in an archive, to me the important thing is the story that they tell. And those stories, I think, are sometimes intangible, but they're very important for giving a sense of identity to a local community that isn't absorbed in that sort of wider bubble. So I would echo entirely the need for that.
Just add to it as well. I mean, it would be a concern that we have, and again, we understand the challenges that the Department of Communities has around funding a multitude of museums. But back to my earlier point, history and heritage is local. Devolution is about local, and about how do we protect that is the challenge. And I suppose one of the things that we've been doing here in the library, or I should say Roddy has been doing, is the development of partnerships and working with other organisations. So, and that helps us bring in the cocktail of funding. If we were to survive just on the we couldn't survive just on the money from the Department of Communities, but it was one of the topics that came up when we were discussing this policy here at our last trustees meeting about, in our response, we would be emphasising that issue of partnerships, but you need some money up front to be able to allow you to go out and work with other organisations to develop other funding streams, to develop other projects that help to sustain an institution like this. And I do agree, I have a bit of a bane upon it as well, as being a civil servant from Armagh, working in Belfast for my lifetime. Most of the civil servants sort of, their vision maybe stretched about 10 miles down the road, so apologies in that. So yes, I think the advantage of devolution is it's an opportunity to protect those local assets, and we would very much encourage the committee to maybe carry that message back. Sorry, there were other questions.
And if I can touch on your query about the USA 250, we have been at pains here in Armagh to tell the stories of the people. So, for instance, from the outset, we not only dealt with the philosophy that lay behind the American Revolution, but we also decided that we would deal with real, genuine stories as well. So I think a lot of the big characters are well enough known. And again, that's a reflection of some of the work that was done 25 years ago, or 50 years ago as it is now with the 1976 celebrations. But for instance, one of the speakers that we had recently here was William Rolston from the Ulster Historical Foundation, who dealt with some of the lesser well-known characters who played a significant role both in financing the American War of Independence, but even people like Oliver Pollock from Brady in North Tyrone, who is reputed to have conjured up the dollar symbol. So there's small things that have been, they're major things today, but there were small things at the time that were contributed to in that. And even my own paper last night, dealing with Randall MacDonald, who we have termed a Spanish Ulster Scot. This is a man whose direct descendants came from the Glens of Antrim, who happened to be in the Spanish Navy at the time of the American Revolution, and provides us with this unique first-hand account of society in the infant United States. So we've been trying to use it now to try and eke out those smaller stories, because all of us are, I would say, parts of a jigsaw puzzle that make up the whole picture, and these small stories are the ones I think that if we tell them, we begin to approach a situation where we get a fuller picture of what happened historically. But I do think that it's important that those small stories are told. And back to your point about local institutions and local museums, you can only really do that, I think, if you invest at a local level and be able to tell the stories that have a relevance to the local community.
Thank you very much for that, Chair. Just one wee comment. Look, to have an archive is very good. To have a local archive telling local stories is excellent. So I wish you well in all the work that you do.
Thank you, Marsh, and thank you, Colin and Roddy. A very, very interesting session, and I suppose I should just say it's so interesting. We're going to have to be very conscious of keeping an eye on time as well. But listen, that's very useful. We will now take a wee quick discussion around what follow-up actions we may take, but I think that's great to have heard from you, and thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
So, members, I note there was mention around the consultation, actually, which closes on the 22nd of June. I've checked with the clerk, and we're very fond of throwing work out, but I wonder would members agree that we respond to that consultation around the value that we've been to the Ulster Museum, we've been here as well, and I think it would be, some of the points there would be very valid around the archive material. Are members content we draft a response to the consultation, and by way of advice and support and assistance?
And bring it back for committee
Bring it back for approval, yeah. Any other actions members wish to flag up at this time? Otherwise content, yeah. Okay, just let me check my, yep.
We could maybe just ask around what happens if a budget is not set in terms of those letters of offers to those organisations who are waiting on the second quarter, and how quickly can those decisions be made? Might be useful to try and get a wee bit of clarity on that for organisations. Yeah,
and what support is being, or sure, certainly is being offered. Members content with that proposal? Yeah. Okay, members, would members then be content that we move to agenda item 8, which is a briefing from the University of the Third Age? Are members content with that? Yep, thank you. So members, the briefing paper for this agenda item, and this is an oral briefing from the University of the Third Age. The briefing paper for the agenda item can be found starting at page 340 of the meeting pack, and I'd now like to welcome the following to the meeting. So we have Mary McVeigh. Mary is the chair, Gregory Dunstan, who's the honorary secretary, and Tim Hanna, who is the treasurer. So Mary, I think it's yourself maybe is going to make the initial opening statement, and then we'll come to questions from members. Thank you, Mary.
Well, we began in Armagh U3A began in 2011, and it's open to all retired people or semi-retired, all classes and creeds. Our ethos is that when you retire, you don't stagnate, and the idea is that you continue learning after retirement, and it is to be healthy in mind and body. We encourage people to use their skills when they can. So sometimes our members are able to provide classes or workshops for our members, and in other instances we buy in if people have particular interests in these other fields. What else can I say?
Take your time, Mary. You're very much among friends, so.
We have a number of interest groups, as you would have seen from the material we sent you, and we meet once a month in this library for a general meeting where we can socialise, and then we have a guest speaker. We have speakers from all fields and interests. The library is very important to us because we don't have our own premises, so we are really happy to avail of this place because it's a safe environment, it's open to everyone, it's a beautiful building, and it's accessible for people who are past the first flush of youth. It's all on the flat. And as well, there is ample parking, which is very important to us.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Do anybody else want to say anything else before we come to a few questions, or? Yeah. So I was going to actually ask you about what the library here meant, because that's obviously a very strong connection, and you have painted that picture. So given you have at least a home here, how important are groups like yourselves in terms of helping people to stay socially connected, active and mentally stimulated, particularly after retirement or bereavement? And I know from my previous work as Health Committee Chair, recent research has provided evidence that loneliness can be as bad physically for a person as smoking 15 cigarettes per day. So I think the work you do is vital in that context, keeping minds active and keeping people together. So in terms of that dynamic, how much benefit does U3A bring in that sense?
Could
I
answer that?
Yes,
I mean,
anyone can answer.
I'm a relatively recent joiner.
Yep.
And I joined because I'm a retired cleric, and that tends to be a somewhat socially restricted calling. Mm-hmm. You know, you work with a denomination, you work within your parish and congregation. And I mean, particularly post-COVID, I retired during COVID. I mean, I knew I needed to get out. Mm-hmm. So I joined the U3A. It wasn't long before I was elected to the committee, and now I'm the secretary, that's fine, I can contribute to it. I also attend a book group that Mary runs, and that has meant, yes, new friends, and also widened my reading, which I knew I needed to do. So yes, just for a little bit of personal experience, that's how it's helped me, and does help me.
Very good.
You know?
Yeah, that's excellent, yeah.
Can I just chip in? COVID caused a lot of hassle for a lot of people, and it particularly did with U3A as well. Dungannon U3A actually folded after COVID. They just couldn't keep going. And before COVID, I think we had about 220 members. And then COVID hit, and people just were not prepared to come out. But when we kind of got going again, it was almost touch and go. You know, we're almost to the point, flip, is it really worth the candle? And some people just came to me and said, look, you know, we would really miss this so much. And I hadn't really thought how important it was for older people, but they really, really did affect them. So we kind of took the decision to basically get rid of all the dead wood. So we have a membership of about 165. But at least we now feel that the people who are members are genuine members and not just, never seen or whatever. They do turn up. And that's kind of the important thing, I think.
A lot of them are women, particularly widows, and
Yes.
so we do offer a safe environment for them and a place where they can meet others. And a lot of people have said it takes them out of the house, and they're very grateful for that. And also, some of them, like Gregory said, joining the book group, he's got more friends. Also, a lot of people started learning bridge, and we have a very big number of people playing bridge, people who'd never played before and have become quite fanatical about it. My sister is one of them. She's playing bridge 3 times a week.
Any fallouts, Mary? Do they fall out? I was thinking. Okay, well listen, I'm going to come to Melissa and then have Sean. So Melissa, is that all right?
Fiaich Rowe, you're all very welcome. It's Jasper who lives. It's nice meeting with you. And I'm aware too of the University of the Third Age, in particular of the unit they had in Derry, where I worked. Now I am on the brink of retirement myself, so I might be availing of their services. To what extent, and I've no doubt whatsoever about how important the services and that are to people that you have experienced and enjoyed yourselves, but to what extent do you actually get to that, we'll say, target group, or by its very name, does it maybe discourage some people becoming involved? Do you think, oh, this is very middle class, upper class type setup, that where unless you're highly educated in the first instance, you might not even consider the University of the Third Age, could scare some people. So how do we sort of get to that stage of whereby it encourages maybe those that are most in need of it as well to sort of embrace what the University of the Third Age?
A lot of it's word of mouth in a way, because I completely take your point. And I think maybe it started off as University of the Third Age and then they changed it to U3A, so that kind of, if people didn't work it out themselves, then that sort of helped a wee bit. And we have we've talked at different times about how do we get more members, how do we promote it, but primarily it is word of mouth.
And ours is not confined to any particular class. We have people from all walks of life. I'm very working class myself, and I feel very strongly that people like me should be involved, and it is word of mouth, promoting it ourselves.
Through word of mouth, that you actually would encourage others to become involved in the likes of that. Do you have any then, I was really impressed with the figures that you referred to in terms of Dungannon and that as well too, such great numbers. Do you have then, or do you all operate independently, we'll say, as a group in a particular location, or are you part of an overall structure that whereby maybe cooperation from other groups exists?
We have, we are a group that serves in the Armagh district area. There are groups pretty well all over Northern Ireland. We were convened to a meeting in, was it early March, Mary, in Belfast, actually, with the CEO of the Third Age Trust, which is the kind of holding trust UK-wide. I mean, there are far more branches and far groups and far bigger ones across the water. But this, we had that day in Belfast, we had people from Enniskillen, we had people from Coleraine, from Newry, from all over, from Sperrin, relatively small group of about 40 people. So yes, we are all over. There was somebody from County Antrim who I think would have been very sensitive to what you've just said about the range of people who are attracted to us. And yes, and so clearly there may be an issue there.
Yeah.
There are also U3A groups in the south with a different, that coordinate, I think they call it the U3A hub, that which is their central body. I'm not sure, I don't know how otherwise they're organised, but I know they're there.
Yeah. And just one final question. Do you have any source of funding or support?
No.
No, we have a subscription of 20 quid a year. Again, the big fallout from after COVID and the rapid increase in energy costs. Before, maybe 5-10 years ago, there was no problem getting a room very cheaply indeed to just run a course. And we found now that after COVID, certainly the last 4 or 5 years, it is a big issue of having enough money to cover the cost of rooms we have to hire to run our lessons, which is why we come here, because Roddy's very welcoming and it works. But
and it isn't overly expensive,
no.
compared to other places,
Yeah.
hotels and the like. Yeah. And as well, they have all the facilities like overhead, for PowerPoint presentations and the like. And we can use, if we need, this room and part of the other room as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa. Sharon?
Thank you, and thank you so much. Mary, it struck me there, my mother is one of those widows that joined the U3A, and it is that social isolation and that meeting new friends, I think, is a really important part of the purpose of it. The other thing that really strikes me about U3A is the variety of courses, classes, trips, outings, talks, and I'm just wondering with yourselves, how do you decide on an annual basis what it is that you're going to focus on, or is there a way that your members can maybe feed in about specific interests, or like the likes of the USA 250, are they things that come up during the year that you can engage with? Whoever wants to.
Well, we decide really. We kind of lurch sometime from one thing to the other, what are we going to have in the next few months? The monthly meetings are very important, where we can all come together, and we have a range of speakers. Now, Roddy has actually spoken a couple of times on different historical topics. We had Richard Moore recently, from Children Crossfire, and that went down very well with Kevin Bell,
yes,
another time from, and we had the fire service and Consumer Council and
Rory Best, I saw was in your...
Yes, we had Rory Best. We try to vary it as much as possible. And if people express an interest in a new topic, somebody said, why don't we have line dancing? So we arranged that. And we have Pilates and yoga. And we have local history, which is my baby.
And I suppose for me, because I cover a very rural constituency, and the area I live in is Ballycastle, and you do have quite a lot of that rural connection, and I think it's not just about the social isolation is one element, but when you then bring in, when you talk about outside of Belfast, particularly the rural isolation, would you find that even though you're based obviously in Armagh, would you get a lot of
Country people.
well, yeah, but more that that rural isolation, particularly at an older age, particularly then whenever you finish your working career, I think can be a real shock to the system, particularly in rural areas.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. Our area covers what used to be the old Armagh Council, Armagh District Council. It takes in villages around, and we would get, and we get some from County Tyrone as well. So,
No, that's brilliant, thank you, thanks.
And I was just checking there, I think the wine appreciation class has caught the eye of our clerk here. And I'm wondering, is that an expensive course today?
It's closed.
It's totally close. We don't even get into it. It's ridiculous.
None of us are in it.
It's a kind of club within a club, as far as I can see.
Well, listen, that's really, really fantastic. I have to say, it's terrific work. It really is. And I suppose I do want to check, and it's been touched on there, but maybe if we could draw it out a little more around the practical pressures with raising costs and lack of funding. So how do you manage to keep the activities affordable and accessible to members?
Because we do them ourselves, you know. The French, we have someone who takes a French class, and it's one of our members, it doesn't cost. The big group doesn't cost, and I do the local history, and so obviously not charging for that. So where we can, we use our own people, and then we buy in. And Tim is a great treasurer. He's terrific at dealing with the money.
I just asked a question that you might be able to answer it. We're obviously a charity, a registered charity, and doing the annual charity return is, in fairness, just a pain in the butt to do it. I'd heard a vague rumour that the Charity Commission were possibly thinking of letting smaller charities, or charities with an annual income of less than maybe 10 grand a year or something like that, to not have to go through the hoops of doing it. It seems bonkers that we're doing it. It takes a lot of time and hassle, and okay, I do it for another organisation, so I know how it's done, but if I wasn't the treasurer and somebody else moved in to do it, they wouldn't have a clue. You know, it's
Yeah, I have to say, I will just reiterate again that we're the committee that scrutinises the department. However, we are aware that the department are proposing to bring a bill forward, and we believe that will be an element of it.
Oh, might that happen, right?
Yeah, and so we think that is
right.
Possibly imminent in a legislative sense, and that the start of that process, I think there is a recognition. And I have to say, it comes across very strongly today, the volunteer ethos that's going on, the amount of your time you're putting in to support, you know, and provide such good work that is so important, and that we're very often, in terms of us as a government here, reliant on people like yourself to deliver so much add value, but we're maybe not as quick to support it. So I have to say, if barriers like that can be addressed, I think that's very valid that would happen. So we're awaiting sight of that, and as a committee we will be scrutinising that, so your input in terms of how that impacts you is very, very useful.
The other thing is that you find, even in our committee, you get some of the people, we're talking about money, and then they just say, well, can I get a grant? You know, and when the people say that on a committee, I just think, you know, wise up. You know, if you can do the thing without having to go through all that red tape, and, you know, do it ourselves, forget about grants. And I'm a big believer in that if we can, and I think
Yes,
everybody's pretty well the same. And
yeah, and I hear you, Tim. It's almost like it's not worth the effort, but in a way that's not good enough in a sense. But I recognise that's what many small and important, and indeed quite significant community groups like yourselves, when you take the federation into account, continue to do. So I think as a committee we have been, and that's partly why we're here today, within the Department for Communities, that deals with housing, that deals with the welfare system, deals with sport. Some of these issues like arts and culture, and indeed community and heritage, can get, you know, potentially squeezed out. So we have always been keen as a committee here to keep a focus on some of these issues. So we'll reflect that back, and certainly the information and knowing the impact that it's having is useful to us moving forward throughout all of our work. So I really do appreciate that, and thank you for attending today. I'm going to check with members if there's any follow-up actions, and then we're going to just take a wee short comfort break. So just to let you know, but we're finished grilling you, Mary, so I'm just going to have a wee discussion now to check if members wish to suggest anything in terms of follow-up, or are members content with the briefing? Content. Okay, thank you, members. We'll take a short
Thank you.
5-minute break there. Thank you all. Thank you, folks. All right, thank you very much, everyone. So we're at agenda item 9. Is that correct?
We are
Presuming
at 9,
members
yes.
at agenda item 9. Yeah. So this is the Mellon Centre for Migration Studies. It's an oral briefing, and due to the late change of agenda, there is no briefing paper for the item. But I'd now like to welcome the following to the meeting: Dr. Liam Campbell from the Mellon Centre for Migration Studies. Liam, would you go ahead with an opening statement, please, and then we'll get to questions from members. Thank you.
Gurmayo got the carja Tabiha Sorum. So thank you for the invite and indeed for the ongoing support from the Department of Communities. I suppose maybe if you didn't have a briefing, I'll give you a very short potted history. The Mellon Centre for Migration Studies is based at the Ulster American Folk Park, in close partnership with our partners in Libraries NI and National Museums NI. So we're very much in our DNA. We're a very small centre. I suppose our line is we're a specialist expertise in the story of the migrations of peoples of the island of Ireland across the globe. We're the only one centre on the whole island of Ireland that actually is dedicated totally to migration. But because we're small, we very much partner with so many people, I suppose, particularly in the DFC family, but also the likes of working with Roddy here and other people. We have, I suppose, a very holistic view of the study of migration. And what I mean by that is we look at immigration, internal migration and immigration. So in other words, immigration is coming in. Well, those that are coming in were immigrants from somewhere else. We also look at immigration out, and then we look at internal migration, which increasingly people are very interested in. It could be moving from one parish to another or one county to another. Everybody's very aware of that term, the blow-in. And we have an expression, our strapline, I've given you a little flyers you can take with you. It's exploring the migrant and everyone. So that is, I suppose, in our DNA, that it is a holistic view, and because of that, we're working with communities throughout, just throughout everywhere and in constant demand. Migration has been alluded to today here among yourselves as a committee personally and in previous speakers is, you know, it's such a major subject. So we deal with it in expertise, and I suppose we have colleagues that have studied it and written about it for many years. But really, it's something that comes from a stable of history, but actually it has major lessons for today. And I'll give you a little example of two things of that that are probably related to the DFC family. We did a project with Prony lately, and it was called Collab Archive. We hold an archive of about 80,000 immigrant letters. And what we did was a group of, I suppose, to use the word, recent migrants were invited to come and to look at the letters, the historical letters. And they were to pick out 3 of them. And then they were to write their own letters. And if you think about it, the emotion of migration, leaving home, whether you left in the 18th century, the 19th century, or the 20th century. And what happened was these people got involved in a project. They made their own podcast as well, based on the history. So that's just one example of how history and modern migration meet. We were approached last year by the PSNI to look at host communities who are hosting new arrivals, particularly in Armagh. And how that worked is the host communities were brought out to the folk park. We walked through that whole idea of leaving, crossing and arriving. And how it worked was that it was to say to them, migration is not new, because it tends to become, as everybody here knows, a very loaded word. But actually, when you look at it and you look at our history, in a sense, we're all migrants. So, yes, we may come from a historical stable, but it has very modern resonance. And that ties in very much, I think, with, Programme for Government about, it's been referred to earlier in the previous presentations about well-being and social inclusion, and community cohesion. That idea of saying, if you kind of realise that you're a migrant yourself, then you're less likely to demonise or the other or make the other it. We're a small team, but we're in constant, I suppose, we don't have to go to look for work. We have 3 staff, Sebastian Graham, Dr. Paddy Fitzgerald and myself. I'll just give you an example of a few things that happened the last few weeks, and that might be better than going through everything we do. We're very involved in the Prony US 250 publication. My colleague, Dr. Paddy Fitzgerald, was one of my advisors on that, and that was launched in Belfast City Hall just a few weeks ago. But on a community level, the last 4 weeks we've been out in 4 different groups. We've been in Craigavon, Cliftonville, the village in Belfast, and Park in County Derry. And that was a project called So You Think You're From Here. So you think you're from Belfast. The idea being that, for example, we were with a group in the village in Belfast, and when they started to look at them, they all came in, their ancestors, from the rural to the urban to work in linen mills. And that really works very well with communities. We could be out every single night doing something on migration, because literally it's something that affects everybody. I'm quite sure if we went round the room here, every single person has a migration story. If it's not you, it's your wider family. And so it is, I suppose, it's in demand, not just because of sometimes current controversies and loaded, but actually to look at it historically. We were talking very much here about the 250. This is a very important year for the Folk Park and our colleagues in libraries and national museums. The Folk Park is 50 years old this year. It was a bicentenary project of of the Declaration of US Independence. It's the 50th anniversary. We are hosting now on the 24th to the 27th of June a major international academic conference called the Ulster American Heritage Symposium, and it's looking at that there. And the theme is Ulster Migrants' Relationship with Others. So that's looking at the wider area in America that sometimes you can be very insular, but actually say, how do people get on with Indigenous peoples? How do people get on with Germans? So it's broadening that debate out. And every 2 years, it's here 1 year, the second year it's always in America. This year it's here, and that's our theme. We're very much involved in helping train the guides in the Folk Park in the story of migration. We're also involved very much with Libraries and I doing a series called Heritage from Home. For example, in the Derry City and Strabane Council area, we're advising on the new DNA, the Derry North Atlantic Museum. Involved at the minute with Brady and Strabane, Ulster Scots community, looking at the people from that area who have emigrated to America. Another interesting project is the new Armagh EA Struhl campus. If you're aware of it, it'll be the largest shared education here. We were asked by EA to come into that. You might say, well, how did migration come into that? And I think this is how, if you really think about it holistically, it can be very useful. It wasn't our idea. It was one of the directors in EA had heard some of us speak and said, these schools are all leaving an old place. They're coming to a new place. They're coming together. It's actually a migration story. Okay, they might only be moving, a mile or two, but all that things of migration about leaving, crossing and arriving, what do you bring with you from your old place? That is, so we loved that. We didn't have to go looking for that work. They asked us, and it was probably one of the best things we've done in the past few years, is worked with the pupils, worked with the boards of governors, to try and, nothing to do with the finance and the building and the story of education, but to try and help that movement of people, just to see it as a migration story. And it was great fun as well. Yesterday we were involved with the Chest, Heart and Stroke, people doing a talk on migration. And it isn't, even though they're academics, that it's very much community orientated. When you start this, we find that the people will tell us their story. We only end up facilitating it because you go around the table, and it was incredible in Armagh yesterday. There was about 24 people who had all suffered a stroke, and the stories were amazing. You know, somebody whose family came there because of the railway, somebody else came whose family were in the military, somebody else came because they came to work in the TNF. You know, that idea of exploring the migrant and everyone. So, as I say, we don't have to go looking for work. We work with councils, we work with community groups. You know, the department is called a department for community. So, even though sometimes there is a perception, it came up at the last one, using the word university and academics, yes, we do work, we do teach at Queen's, we supervise PhDs, that there, but actually, ultimately, I think where a lot of our work is within communities, and that's what we want to do, is to take that message out to people, to say, to think about migration, not just historically, but actually to tie it into a contemporary way as well. So that's just to give a little bit of a background to what we do, and we are very thankful for the Department of Communities for their constant support. As I say, we see ourselves totally as a partnership and cooperative institution because we're small. You know, 3 people need other people, and that's in a sense, to steal the word from the council, it's in our DNA as well, and it's a joy. It's something that, if we had more, you know, we could be out every week at it. I was in Coleraine at Mount Sandal last Saturday. We're helping, there's a new project in Coleraine, an archaeological dig. As you probably know, Mount Sandal was the oldest settlement in the island of Ireland, and I suppose, to be fair to say, hasn't had a lot of, and Coleraine needs a lift for that. We've been advising that as seeing it's 9,000 years ago, as a migration project. So yes, that's the variety of the work. 9,000 years ago, advising on a migration project, doing work with the police in Armagh, or further afield with recent arrived migrants. It's still ultimately the same story about moving home and trying to, I suppose, help a wee bit of, you know, community cohesion. I'm just looking behind me there, you know, inclusivity, diversity, health and well-being. You know, it suits us to be connected to the Department for Communities.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And, you know, our role as the Committee for Communities is to, obviously we scrutinise, but also we advise and assist the department, and we're very interested in that sense of there. And when you say that about the story of migration, it's actually the story of humanity. We are migrants by nature.
Absolutely.
Apart from anything else.
Absolutely.
And I was really fascinated at you said something to me outside, which I had never thought of, was around the idea that we see water often as a barrier, but water is also a channel and a pathway, and actually people can, it is a route by which people go to other places. So that's interesting. I was also very interested, 2 years ago, the Speaker, Edmund Poots, did a Seachtain na Gaeilge event in the Shannon Chamber around migration flows backwards and forwards from Scotland to here. And like, I only thought I knew a tiny bit of that story. It was actually eye-opening and transformative in a sense when you started to unpeel it back and you see that it's actually, these things aren't one way or static. They're dynamic, they're ongoing, they're perpetual, they're important, they're part of the life, the life flow. I also was struck by your opening remarks, and I hadn't thought about this until today, I have to say. But my own elder brother, there's 10 of a family of us, my own brother Jimmy, emigrated essentially when he has come home, and he's home now and all of that. But when he was young, maybe 18 or 19, and he's the oldest in our house, all the rest of us, and Jimmy's leaving our house was one of the only times I ever seen my own father cry. Huge emotion around it, because there was huge loss attached to it, and we're often celebrating, you know, the flows and the good things about it. But there's also a lot of hardship people often going by necessity rather than any other driver. So how do you balance that story of celebrating the impact and the positivity of migration, along with the hardship and the poverty and all of the other elements that may have been involved?
That's an excellent question, and I think the word I would use is complex and nuanced. It is a story of humanity, so sometimes people go because they had to go. Sometimes people go because they want to go, they want to get out of a small place. And I suppose part of our work is to actually untangle that. There's no simple answer to it, but it's to help communities untangle that and understand the complexity that migration brings. And it's the same with regard to that narrow band of water. You know, people coming and going influence language, influence, you know, sometimes I think there's an idea that migration is somehow, or people talk about plantation of the 1600, about come from Scotland. Well, actually, people have been going back and forward between Scotland for millennia. Colmcille from Donegal. So, you know, I think that is very, I suppose, intuitive to actually say that it is a movement, it is not simple. So how do we balance it? I think what you do is you try and make people realise their own story. You try and get people, and then I think ultimately what comes out of that is what I'd call empathy. That if you realise, you know, it's that idea of moving home. So for some, I mean, that group in the village in Belfast, they said that their parents said, moving from, say, even Lurgan or County Down into Belfast, they might as well have been going to America. Now, you know, okay, it's easier to go home, but that idea, I suppose the core concept of home and moving home, and I think as you rightly said, it's complex. There's no simple reason. People have had to move. There's a project we're working with in Ulster University, and you've mentioned Ultucht here, a project called Cane, and they're looking at the movement of the peoples during the Troubles, you know, which is a migration. It's probably forced, but then there's also, I mean, my daughter went to Australia. We were very lonely and we were heartbroken, but she made a choice to go. She didn't have to go. So it's a subject that, you know, somebody said to me lately, if you Google the word migration or an image, you'll see some image maybe of a poor child washed up on a beach in Lampedusa, which is horrendous. But actually, it's so much, it's become a very loaded term associated with certain, and, you know, it is an issue. I'm not saying it's definitely not a simple issue. We don't aim to provide simple answers except to say, is exactly what you said, Chair, that it is part of the human condition. There's a woman lately we're dealing with called Sonia Shah, an American academic, and she's written a book called The Next Great Migration. And it's partly to do with climate change and, you know, the movement of peoples, which is going to be a major issue. You know, as the Sahara moves north, people are going to be moving. And she was actually she makes this very simple point that migration is the norm. It's not the exception. Movement of human people is the norm. And I think maybe our reason, you know, and working with people, I think complementary, like with what they do here, what Prony do, is to try and just holistically look at that message, and that's what we try and do. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of, you've touched on the US 250, why does the history of migration from Ulster to America, or from Ireland to America, still matter today, particularly for young people who may not immediately see that it's relevant to them? Why is that story relevant?
Well, one of the things is a word that's often used is the diaspora, and is which is something that, you know, certainly it was very much to the fore when Mary Robson was, you know, that idea of lighting a candle and being aware of a wider diaspora. And again, you know, I would say that when we talk about America, it's not this was alluded to up in the launch of the Prony book in City Hall 2 weeks ago. You know, it's not a binary either. I think it's incumbent on all of us to look at the complexity and the nuance. So, for example, sometimes there's kind of a simple binary that 18th century migration to America is just pure Ulster Scots, and somehow 19th century is kind of a post-famine and a largely Catholic migration. Actually, recent research has shown that actually most people from a Presbyterian, Ulster Scots, wider thing actually emigrated in the 19th century. So I think sometimes it's to look at how that kind of affects us here as well, and reflects back on our own identity and the complexities of our own identity. So yes, US is very dominant in our news at the moment. It's a seminal time, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to look at that history and the complexities of it. For example, the theme of our conference this year, last year, 2 years ago, we had a theme called The How of Migration. So that was looking at, like, for example, what were the networks that worked, to get there. It's like chain migration, or somebody told you that went there, or how long did a boat travel take? Just that kind of logistics of migration. This year we're looking at Ulster migrants' relationship with others, because again, you realise that there were people in America. It's not just Ulster Scots. There were Germans, English were there, Indigenous peoples. So, and young people are interested in that. They're interested in, I think, as we go through the complexity of history and the non-binary stories that I think that migration tell us.
Okay, listen, that's great, and a great particular focus, I have to say, Liam, and your expertise shines through there in that regard. I think it's a fascinating story, and I think the thing that you touched upon there in relation to the fact that it's as old as time itself. People almost nowadays seem to think this is a current issue, or a current somehow different. It's as old as ourselves. Melissa, go ahead, please.
And it's very interesting, just the concept as well too, that you don't have to leave the country to be an immigrant in a sense. It's like, take my own family name, that it's the most common name in the area where I live, and it's documented in the Annals of the Four Masters and that in the 12th, 13th century. So we might think we always lived here, but we didn't. That's why the name McHugh is very much the western seaboard, coming from Galway, actually, from the other Flaherty. So clearly these McHughs had been moving all the time, and okay, a bunch of them have landed in that part of Tyrone. And I'm sure that whenever they would have landed initially, they would have experienced the same thing that the Irish people would have experienced whenever they went to America. And whether they were, we'll say, of Ulster Scots or Scots origin, or of Indigenous Irish themselves, they would have met with a lot of prejudice, in particular from the Germans who were there before them. And it's where you'd have had that concept then too about the economic ladder. And this one immigrant group arrived, they pushed the immigrant group who were there before them up that economic ladder. The only difference being that whilst the Irish actually were able to get onto the economic ladder and be pushed up it as well too, the black people in America, they never were allowed to even get on it. They never were allowed to get on it. But it has left us with a sense of appreciation that when that diaspora, which is of many, went to so many countries throughout the world, that they would have been confronted with that same prejudice. They would have dealt with it, would have eventually been accepted. That it leaves us that it's nearly within our DNA to accept people coming into the island of Ireland now presently. And let's face it, like, this is becoming a burning issue for a lot of people, you know. And all the more reason why it is that we should always say too that, you know, with pride, the land of the Cardinal and the Fiaich, the 100,000 welcomes was what Ireland was known as.
Yeah.
I'd like to see it continue in that sort of vein as well too. Or even another expression that you had when you talked about people living together, Marandini, Luscatla, Sheila. We all live in each other's shadows. We all live in each other's shadows, and it's learning how to cope with that then as well too. But the work that you are doing there is so like in that sense, and that hopefully will bring it home to people and allow them to just realise that that is what we are doing.
Yeah.
We're living in each other's shadows, and we have to respect each other at that level.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, Liam, listen, thank you. That's been very, very fascinating element of this. You okay?
Yes.
In the very near future. So, and you mentioned Mount Sandal, the first known settlement of man in Ireland. It's well known but very well hidden in Coleraine.
Yes.
There's no signposts. There's no indication of how to get there, what the historical is, and you also touched on migration and the large proportion of the Presbyterian settlement in the coastal area that moved from Coleraine. And from London area and from Portrush out to America at a time of mass migration.
And I think, I mean, that's right too, in terms of reasons came because you have to realise that people that left Scotland were fleeing. There was religious persecution, same as Moravians or Lutherans, and also famine. I mean, people forget there was famine in Scotland as well. You know, so it is complex, but I think Mount Sandal, I agree with you in that we used to bring students there. This is not to pinpoint at any council or anything, but there was never any proper signage or any way to get to it. And this is you know, the site in the whole island of Ireland of, you know, a massive importance, but I know that the council, as far as I understand it, bought the site now and there's work going on. So I think you know, you can look at it archaeologically and look at evidence, but it's also to see it as a kind of a metaphor for migration. I think is a great thing. Yeah.
Mostly through you, Chair, immigration. The Scottish people mainly coming up the river.
Yeah.
And then you had the Vikings and so on and so forth, and some of the Vikings actually stayed, and you know the way it works. Yeah, very interesting. Thank you, Liam.
No, it's fascinating. And that Mount Sandal is fascinating. It's a really significant site and much undervalued, I think, still. I think there's a lot to be done there. Pam, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to say thank you for your time today. I think these sessions have been very, very interesting and they make very good points, and I think does underline the importance of the work such as NI 250 and the importance of history and of telling those stories, whatever those stories are, and telling them in a factual manner. I think that's really important and really good, and it's good for everybody. And it was just to make another comment too, in terms of migration. I had spent a time as junior minister, and in that time I had the opportunity and privilege of meeting lots of people from other countries who came to visit us in Northern Ireland, ambassadors and whatnot. And if I got the opportunity to get into conversation with them, I often asked them about migration, immigration, and how they were dealing with that within their countries. And it really struck me that everybody had the same issues, because there's a worldwide, and there always has been, as you point out, movement of people, and this will happen. People are displaced and moved because of wars and different issues and different circumstances. Absolutely. But I suppose that doesn't take away from the fact it still has to be managed. Everybody has to manage it. We're not borderless world. We do have to manage that and ensure that we have public services in place to cope with whoever we have living in this place. But I was just to say thank you for your presentation. I think it's been very useful and very interesting.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Pam, and thank you, Liam. And good luck with that important work. It's a fascinating area in its own right, and a much bigger area, I think, when you start to drill into it the way you're doing.
You're all welcome to the symposium as well, so I'll send you out invites as well through the department. Is that okay?
Fair play.
Thank you.
Neatly done. Thank you, Liam. Thank you very much. So we're moving now, members, on ahead to agenda item 11, which is a briefing from the Armagh Robinson Library. It's an oral briefing. The briefing paper for the agenda item can also be found starting at page 351 of the meeting pack. And I'm now delighted to welcome to our meeting Carol Conlon, and Carol is the assistant keeper. So We'll let you get settled in and comfortable, Carol. To Fiaich Road. Yeah. So, Carol, can I invite you to go ahead and make a brief opening statement, and then we'll go to questions from members.
Yes,
Thank
certainly.
you.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to come here. In a way, it's that lovely combination that happens here in Armagh. I mean, Armagh Robinson Library, we always will say we're the oldest public library in Northern Ireland, that there are much older libraries on the island of Ireland. What I love is the fact that there are 4 libraries in Armagh. We work together rather than in any sense of competing when we want to highlight annual events like World Book Day, National Poetry Day. And will you forgive me if Roddy has already said similar things to you when he was speaking. But it's that idea, there's the 4 libraries, 2 are libraries NI, 2 are independent, we share the work for that. And I'd like you to be encouraged to know that, so that for us as an 18th century library, we're not a standalone sort of set apart. It's the idea of what is relevant today that allows more people to know what's in a library and to encourage them to come. And that is why we've been working at different levels as a working library, because that we will never stop being. And certainly I can let you know that when I was growing up in Armagh, it then called Armagh Public Library, was seen as a place for academic research, and that was it. And I don't decry that at all. But it was a keeper back in the late 1890s, 1990 that time, who felt very correctly beautiful situation situated between the 2 cathedrals. For example, a wonderful view from the long room of St Patrick's Roman Catholic Cathedral, and we're at the entrance to St Patrick's Church of Ireland Cathedral. So why would there not be an opportunity to have people call in to visit, even if they'd only 15 or 20 minutes to spare, that sort of thing. And that is something we've been building up as well. And I am proud to tell you that when we went through for the grading for Tourism NI, we came out as 4-star for as a visitor attraction, as a museum. I know you're going to say, of course, you're going to blow your own trumpet about this, but please be aware that, you know, we're a very fine library. We also are an accredited museum, and I know that may be something that you're interested in. We value greatly being a member of the Northern Ireland Museums Council. We are a small, independent museum. And over the years, we have gained the opportunity for training, we've gained the opportunity for grants to help promote different aspects, so that we're encouraging much more a community engagement. And that's something we've done for a number of years. And I cite 3 things. One is how we have now welcomed families coming in with very young children. If any of you have been to the library, you'll be aware we're floor to ceiling with books. So very little hands, it could end up being a bit of a problem having very young children. Yet we don't want them to feel unwelcome. So we have had a development to know how we can welcome, that we're seen as a playful museum, in no way taking away from the academic research that still continues. So that's one aspect, that we've been able to encourage families with very young children to come along and to know that they're welcome. And we've worked with the local Sure Start as a result. So again, it's that idea of encouraging people to come. It's ARC Sure Start has worked with us regularly. Then again, through the work of the Northern Ireland Museums Council, we were encouraged to consider working to become a dementia-friendly museum. And I know you can never say that you are a dementia-friendly museum because of the different aspects and the different requirements, needs, etc. But I'm pleased to tell you that we have engaged a very good relationship with the empowerment group for the Armagh area. And for example, next week they'll be coming to us. We will have that lovely link that Liam was referring to of reminiscing. It's a great opportunity. Also, you will have people coming who want to talk about aspects, whether healthcare or whatever, but they do so in a room that makes everybody feel welcome and calm, and therefore it's somewhere that they're very happy to come to us. And the third example I'd like to give you is, again, through the support of the Northern Ireland Museums Council and indeed the National Museums of Northern Ireland, we took part as a very small organisation in the Global Voices Local Choices project, and we decided that we would encourage the Ukrainian families who are based in County Armagh to see if they would be involved with that particular project. They did so. We adapted in that it was meant to be for adults, but because, of course, they are here mainly mothers without any childcare provision, we adapted it so that we could have it on Saturdays or after school and have the young children there as well. And I feel the beautiful response to this has been, we've done a number of projects with them. The Ukrainian families, when they have the opportunity to have, whether their husbands or fathers, come to visit Northern Ireland, maybe for just 1 week, that's all they've got as leave of absence, Armagh Robinson Library will be one of the places that they will bring their visitors to. And they did a lovely thing for us recently. They offered to translate our information flyer into Ukrainian, because I'd happened to say to them that we're now getting visitors who are Ukrainian based in other parts of Ireland. They were so pleased about that. So I'd like you to be aware of the community engagement that this 255-year-old library this year is doing, so that it's still wanting to do all it can to make sure that there's access to its actual collections, and equally making people feel, well, I want to come back there, I want to tell other people. And last week we were able to host 2 events within the Jaipur Literature Festival, and that went very well indeed. And we had it was more an in-conversation in the morning, definitely to do with literature. In the afternoon, it was a mindfulness session, which again worked very well, and in many ways fits in with the inscription that we have carved in stone above our entrance door. It's in Greek, and we translate it as the healing place of the soul. And we would hope that if you have a chance, if you haven't been, that there will be a time that you will come to visit us to see what I'm talking about. So I hope I've identified a little bit more in addition to the page. I just sent a 1-pager. I imagined you have so much paperwork to read. But I'd like you to know that, and also to be aware that you have helped us. We're an independent library and museum. We are not funded by the church, even though it was established by an Archbishop of the Church of Ireland. And I've just come from our quarterly meeting, and the current Archbishop John McDowell, was there in the chair. So sometimes people think, oh, you must be funded by the church. We are not. Archbishop Robinson made us independent. So therefore we can, in these days, actually seek funding from different sources. And we were most grateful when the Department for Communities agreed to the threefold project that we've had of the 6 lectures. We had the 5th one last night. He may be too modest to tell you, but our guest speaker last night was Roddy speaking to us. And we have one more to do. But that was a really positive thing as well. And it was the idea of 3 organisations, Armagh County Museum, this library, and Armagh Robinson Library, working together. And we'd like to think that you looked favourably on that, because it was 3 organisations working together within the city of Armagh, rather than any one of us trying to apply for funding for that particular project. So I hope I've talked enough and not too much.
Absolutely, and I think you've inspired us in a very short period of time, so my who, well done for that. And just to say, so our role is to scrutinise, assist and advise the department. We're the committee, but we certainly will be reflecting all of this learning back through to the department. I went to secondary school here in Armagh, so I have a very keen sense of that, like that ecclesiastical capital of Ireland, and not just geographically, but genuinely and kind of ecclesiastical capital of the mind, almost, in terms of the cooperation between the churches and the example that leads, and indeed Armagh's significance not only as a Christian in Christianity, but its pre-Christian importance and significance. So I think there is a real energy around, you know, the academic and the history and all of that, which I think makes Armagh a particularly important site. And which is why I'm not surprised that we have 2 fantastic resources like yourselves, the O'Fee Library, and that here in Armagh. I don't think that's any accident at all. I'm really interested in the element of how you've reached out to those what are very often harder to reach and underserviced groups, such as the dementia, such as the carers, and indeed those Ukrainian people who have came here fleeing war and difficulties of their own. And we're conscious of also talking about people who have fled from here to other places, and the reciprocal potential that we have to recognise that. And I'm a huge fan of libraries in general, and I have to say, I'm ashamed to say I haven't been in the Armagh Robinson Library, but I promise you I'll be remedying that situation as soon as possible. I'm looking forward to going to it. But how important is it that these spaces are supported and are free and accessible to people, that libraries are a resource for everyone, and for children, for young people, older people, a resource and a home where people can go free or certainly at an accessible rate.
Is that a question or
Question,
a comment?
yeah.
Yes,
How important
absolutely.
you see that element of it?
Absolutely. Certainly, we are. I mean, we've always had free access. That has been the case since the 18th century, which is, I think, pretty impressive in that way. No, very much so. It's the idea of how we can encourage schools and other groups to come to us who may have been shy of coming to a library, or who may feel, well, if I go in there, I'll be expected to say I'm undertaking some research. So it's that idea of opening it up, of including very much so, and having the repeat visits and making people feel welcome, having reasons for people to come to the library, and then there will be reasons why they will come back. And that reference to the Jaipur Literature Festival, people came to Armagh, stayed overnight, and the next day chose to come to visit us as a library, because obviously it had been set out for a public event. And that, I think, is a lovely recommendation, that they felt comfortable and interested to come back. We certainly, in terms of our building up and linking with community engagement, I will be straight, it has been being a member of the Northern Ireland Museums Council over a number of years. And I'm sure you know that their funding sources as well, they have been supportive, they have encouraged us in that way. And in turn, we then, having linked with organisations, whether the Alzheimer's Society, their local link, the Arksure Start, local primary schools, we have worked with them to gain that knowledge to know. So we didn't just provide what we thought might work, we've worked with people. So you're getting that engagement and that wish for them to see us succeeding in that way. We certainly have group tours. We certainly, when we have group tours being planned, let's say for community groups, history groups, church groups, we do charge for that. It's a modest amount, but otherwise we never charge for school groups coming in. We never have, we won't, nor for students. We will make an effort as well that it's not a simple case of my or a colleague talking with the group as we're doing here, but generally when we have group visits, we will know what their area of interest is. We will have books relevant to their area. Should it be architecture, music, history, that sort of thing? And they have the opportunity to handle books. We have small groups as a result. We can divide between the cathedral and ourselves and then swap over. So many times we will get that response of, I never thought I'd have a chance to touch a book that was printed 250, 300 years ago. The other thing that we find is working well is not only the series of 6 lectures, but as we would do, we choose a temporary exhibition that lasts roughly about half a year, and it's highlighting particular themes we've got in our collection. So at the moment, you'll not be surprised to know our temporary exhibition is The Road to Independence for USA. And that is going extremely well. It's not that it's a large amount, but it's been very well worked by our archivist. We're getting American visitors saying that's a very fair display, and it's referring to things that may not be pleasant for some people. It's talking about slavery, etc. But it's that idea of taking books from our 18th century library to have a relevance to a specific theme for this year. And it would be remiss of me not to say to you that exhibition will stay until the 4th of July for obvious reasons. After that, we are already working on another exhibition, and that will be to highlight the fact that we have the first edition of Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, and it's 300 years old when it comes to the 28th of October this year. It's Swift's own copy. So again, there's the relevance. We will have guest speakers later in the year, and we will have an exhibition. So we're always trying to do that. We do it in-house. We're a small team, but always trying to have a relevance that, let's say, if Tourism NI decide they want to highlight, as they did some years ago, food and drink of Northern Ireland, we had an exhibition linking with that, another one to do with sport. So we try to have that link so that people coming to visit, it'll make a connection for them.
Okay, thank you, Karen. That actually is a very rich contribution to a very important fabric, and I have to say, hugely important. We've got a strong sense of that across all of the groups in terms of Armagh. Really, really worthwhile, and I'm delighted with the visit. I'm delighted with your contribution. I want to thank you in particular. I know you've rushed across the city to get here at a particular time. I think we're putting pressure on you, I'd say, as well. So really do appreciate you making that effort. Do appreciate your Evans, and we'll pick up on these issues, and we've already agreed we're going to be responding to the consultation, and this information is particularly relevant and timely from yourselves, from Roddy, in relation to the Cardinal Fiaich. hugely informative for us as a committee, and will
Thank
help
you.
and assist us in our work going forward. So thank you, Ciara.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you, members. So, everybody content with that briefing, members, or anything follow-up wise, or are members content to move on to our agenda item 4, draft minutes? We'll just get through these elements of business. So, members, the draft minutes from the meeting on the 20th of May are at page 7. Do members have any edits or amendments to the draft minutes? Are members content to agree the minutes of 28th of May as drafted? And I'll sign on behalf of the committee.
Content.
Thank you. Agenda item 5 is matters arising. Members, you've been provided with a summary table of matters arising at page 19. We've only a few responses to consider this week, so I'll ask for comments as I go through each of those individually. So we're going from 5.2 to 5.6. Item 5.2 is a response from the Department to Committee's questions and concerns on Veterans and Armed Forces pathway. Do members have any comments or views they'd like to raise? No, thank you. Item 5.3 is a substantial response from Nikki to the Department's response to recommendations made in the New Decade New Approach organisational reviews. Do members have any comments or views they'd like to raise? Sian?
Yeah, it was just whether we can write to the Assembly Commission. It's on that point, or the recommendation number 2, around the proposed change of status to become an officer of the Assembly. The Assembly Commission has obviously said it doesn't agree that it should, and I was just wondering if we can check the rationale. I know that we had a briefing from Nikki a while ago and we talked about these recommendations when they first came to us, but in this response I think it would just be useful for us to understand, and also then if we can write to TEO and ask about the update of the progress of the sponsoring department of Nikki being switched over to TEO. And also, Chair, I just want to put on record my admiration and thanks to the whole team at Nikki, but also to Chris Quinn. And I know that there have been some very difficult things said in the press around his office and some of the views. It shouldn't come as any surprise that he stands up for children's rights. And I just want to put on record my support and my admiration for the work that Nikki does.
Yeah, and they're in post to provide a challenging voice on behalf of those very important demographics that they represent. And I think it's crucial that that they can do that separately. They're not kind of lumped in a way which takes the focus off, because they have very particular needs and very particular issues. So, members content with that request from Sian? Yeah, thank you. Item 5.4 is a response from the Department in relation to this committee's questions about the number of legal proceedings and financial transaction capital funding. Do members have any comments or views? No, thank you. Item 5.5 is a response from the Department in relation to the active ageing strategy, and there's an offer to provide a detailed briefing to the committee on the new active ageing strategy action plan in due course. Do members have any comments or views? Or no, thank you. And finally then, item 5.6 is a draft press release from clerking team on the updated anti-poverty strategy, which we agreed last week to be drafted and come back to us for a review. So I'll ask members for any comments or views they'd like to raise. I have one myself, and it's just around the issue sort of right at the start there. Community Committee stand ready to prevent further delay. I think that almost creates maybe an impression that we are part of the delay, and I don't think that we should. I would prefer to maybe see that as something along the lines of Community Committee keen to see no further delay. I think would be more reflective if members will be content. Are members otherwise content, or any other amendments to that press release? Members content. Thank you. Correspondence made that concludes matters arising, members. So moving on to agenda item 6, correspondence. Unlike for matters arising, I'll proceed through this list in bundles and only draw attention to certain items, and if you wish to draw them out, please refer to the reference in the memo, and the memo starts there at page 84. So the first bundle covers items 6.2 to 6.7, and the first item I wanted to pull out is 6.2, is an invitation from the Assembly's Participation and Outreach Team to an event marking Carers Week 2026, which is taking place on the 11th of June, 12:30 to 1:30 in room 115. Members should inform the clerking team if they wish to attend, please. Members are content to do that. Yeah. Item 6.4 is correspondence from Housing Rights regarding homelessness prevention, and there's a request in there for the committee to follow up with the department in relation to work on examining a statutory duty to prevent homelessness. Are members content that we seek an update from the department in relation to its proposed approach and any emerging proposals in terms of this work? Members content? Yeah, thank you. Any other items, members, between 6.2 to 6.7? No, otherwise content to move on to the next bundle, which is 6.8 to 6.13. The first item I'd like to draw out is 6.8. This is correspondence from the Department with an update on the Charities Amendment Bill following public consultation. It also includes updated advanced copies of the bill and explanatory financial memorandum. Do members have any comments or views they'd like to raise? No, content. Do members, in item 6.10 is a copy of correspondence from the Committee for Finance to the Department of Finance on tranche 2 allocations from the Transformation Fund, with particular reference to the 16 million allocated to the Department for Communities for its Pathways to Work and Wellbeing proposal. And the committee had previously sent a number of queries to the Department in relation to the fund. So just flagging that, do members have any other comments or in relation to that item? No. Item 6.11 is correspondence from the Committee for Finance again to statutory committees regarding the Department's 2025-26 public expenditure outturn and forecast outturn and their April R13 submission. Do members have any comments or views on that? No. Members content. And 6.12 is copy correspondence from the Department of Finance to Committee for Finance on National Population Projections. Do members have any comment? Members content. Can I just double check then in relation to that block, which is 6.8 to 6.13, and members otherwise content as per the correspondence memo? Yeah, thank you. So moving on then to the final bundle, which is 6.14 to 6.18. The first I'd like to flag to members is 6.17. Correspondence from the Department on a public consultation regarding liquor licensing in respect of Fiaich na Heron 2026. The consultation opened yesterday, will close on 24th of June. The Department has apologised to the Committee for being given less than 3 days' notice of the consultation due to the tight timescale. They have also advised that officials would be content to address any members' questions, and the team have identified a possible slot on the 18th of June for a briefing should members wish to invite officials. Do members have any comments or views, or would they be content that we receive a briefing on the 18th of June? Yep. Do members wish to flag anything else within 6.14 to 6.18? Otherwise content as per the correspondence memo. Yep, thank you members. There's then a tabled correspondence memo at page 3 of your tabled pack with a further item at item 6.20. So item 6.20 is a copy of correspondence from the Department regarding the draft Housing Supply Action Plan. The Minister intends on bringing the action plan to an executive meeting in June for approval. Can I remind members that the contents of the action plan is embargoed? So I'd just like to say I look forward to getting reading it in more detail. It is quite detailed, and I'd be keen to see that, and it may be the case at some point that we want to take a further briefing, but I welcome the fact that we have it, and I'm looking forward to going through it in more detail. Anything else, members, in relation to that item? No, thank you. Okay, members, that concludes correspondence for today. So moving on to agenda item 7, SR 2026/93, the Registered Rents Increase Order, NI 2026. A copy of the SR is at your pack, members, at page 326. If I can remind members, the committee considered this SL1 at our meeting on the 23rd of April and the 14th of May in 2026, in line with the new process for scrutiny of delegated legislation. Following consideration of the proposal, this committee confirmed it was content for the Department to proceed to make the rule. The Examiner of Statutory Rules report in relation to this rule can be found at page 331. So can I ask, do members have any objection to the rule? No, thank you. Can I therefore formally put the question that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2026/93, the Registered Rents Increase Order, NI 2026, and has no objection to the rule? Are members agreed? Agreed. Thank you, members. Okay, members, we are moving forward in the agenda item then to agenda item 12, which is our forward work programme. I can advise members that a clerk's memo is at page 353 of your pack with suggested dates for ministerial and finance briefings during 2026-27. That's for members to consider and agree. The committee team will then liaise with the DALO to confirm the relevant dates for the forward work programme. So do members have any comments, or are members content to agree the proposed dates as drafted? Content, thank you. Okay, then a copy of the full forward work programme is at page 355. Do members have any comments in relation to that, or are you content to note the forward work programme? Content, thank you, members. Agenda item 13, Ian Growella, any other business? Do members have any other business that they wish to raise today? No, thank you, members. And final agenda item 14 is date, time and location of our next meeting. Members, our next meeting will be at 10 a.m. on Thursday 11th of June 2026 in room 29. Unfortunately, back in Parliament buildings. I think we've all really thoroughly enjoyed today's visit, I have to say. And once again, thank Roddy for hosting us today. We'll be back in room 29 next week. Goramila Mila Moyagov members, thank you very much, and the meeting is now adjourned.